Hey everybody, Keisha here, and today I am here with my friend
Jennifer Guskin,
and we need your help. We are right now working on advocacy for combating human trafficking, and here's why. So we'll give you a little bit of background of our story and why we're doing what we're doing.
I was adopted as an infant by a couple who sold me throughout my childhood. I have been to Epstein Island and on multiple Lolita Express types of flights as a child. After I went public, Child Protective Services opened a substance-exposed newborn case, even though all tests came back negative, and they told me that if I wouldn't stop posting on social media, I would never see my daughter again. I started to connect how I was adopted as an infant and then sold throughout my childhood, how many other children who have been through the adoption, foster, and CPS pipelines have also been trafficked to Epstein's Elk.
And as many of you guys know already, based on the work that we do at the CARES Project, I'm an American Indian born in Canada under the Jay Treaty. My father and I were exposed in the improper contagion mitigation for the COVID pandemic in early 2020. As a result of this, I lost everything: a house, cars, corporate assets, jobs. Bank accounts were shut down in Canada, and I fled to the US as an American Indian, fully documented, and was trafficked by rogue agents in ICE and other agents in the government, and forced to live with single American men. I was even imprisoned for 7 months initially, and then trafficked throughout the states. Put on full surveillance tracking and wasn't allowed to leave the city house or state without permission or work without permission. And that happened for many years, and I was on and off the streets because of that, and in and out of shelters. And that is just a small example of what many go through in this trafficking system, be it the family courts or otherwise. So that's why the CARES Project will be going to DC to speak with representatives and do live reporting. We're also going to be in contact with other families who are dealing with human trafficking, and through the CPS courts or through any other means, lesser versions of trafficking, and doing reporting on them live and otherwise. We will also be working on, we ultimately want to shine light on what's going on with the trafficking here in the US. And we also want to meet with various agencies in DC, and we'll be going back and forth for training sessions and other things so that we can be better equipped to help people deal with resolving some of the issues that we're seeing. We will also be putting forth petitions in government to help people get justice, and that's something that we have been working on already so far. We have some petitions that have recently been filed in the state of Colorado, Michigan, Texas, and Arizona, and we will be continuing.
But we can't do this on our own. We will be traveling to events and training courses, as well as DC on a consistent basis. We also have to get acceptable equipment, such as computers, cameras, interview gear, etc. There will be other miscellaneous costs that would also be like gas, food, and rooms if necessary.
So that is why we are working towards combating human trafficking, and that is exactly why we need your help. We cannot do this alone, and most what the CARES Project does is on its own dime. And so we do love and appreciate each and every one of you that support us and all the work that we do. As many of you know, we also live stream on Lindell TV every day. And everything we do, like I said, is on our own dime. So we appreciate all the love and support and all the people who do donate, and we would very much love and appreciate that still. Thank you everybody for your time and considerations, and thank you for all the support, and we will catch you guys in the next one, and hopefully we might see you guys in the future and come across you and maybe be able to do some great things together.
Bad trigger finger. Have to cut that out. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the CARES Project podcast. Today we have with us Alex Baker. He's got his Juris Doctorate, was a successful TV and music.
Like gas, food, and rooms if necessary.
So that is why we are working towards combating human trafficking, and that is exactly why we need your help. We cannot do this alone, and most what the Karis Project does is on its own dime. And so we do love and appreciate each and every one of you that support us and all the work that we do. As many of you know, we also live stream on Lindell TV every day. And everything we do, like I said, is on our own dime. So we appreciate all the love and support and all the people who do donate. And we would very much love and appreciate that still. Thank you everybody for your time and considerations. And thank you for all the support. And we will catch you guys in the next one, and hopefully we might see you guys in the future and come across you and maybe be able to do some great things together.
Bad trigger finger. Have to cut that out. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Karis Project podcast. Today we have with us Alex Baker. He's got his Juris Doctorate, was a successful TV and music producer, composer, and so forth, who had his life wiped away from, civil court family matter from his ex-wife, of retaliation for finding some unlawful forged contracts and so forth, where you got wiped out of your business, pretty much everything you own, and $1 million. And now you're, kind of coming together to kind of fight this because you've gone through this whole situation yourself. So you want to kind of give yourself an introduction to our audience?
Sure, yeah. My name is Alexander C. Baker, JD. My friends call me Alex. Those two letters at the end of my name mean that I went to and graduated from law school. I am a legal expert. I'm not and never have been and never will be a licensed attorney, because the Bar Association is a club that they will never let me into. I went to law school kind of in my later life. It's my second career. As Dale mentioned, I did have a very successful career writing and producing music for film and television. And as he mentioned, all my entire life and career was stolen from me, first illegally by my ex-wife / business partner in all of that. And then she spent 10 years in the family court system, making it all legal on paper, right? So, yeah, I had 3 houses, 2 children, 1 successful business, my entire life's work, and about $1 million stolen from me. But I have, for the last decade or so, since I graduated from law school, have made a second career, and that is litigating controversial matters and trying to put both my experience and my expertise and my education to work, helping people try to figure out what to do about this extortion racket, this brutal situation that's going on everywhere in the family court systems across the country, and I think throughout the Western world as well. It's simply not a justice system. It's an extortion racket. So that's a little bit about who I am. I should also mention that for anything that we want to talk about, any question, I really can give one of 2 answers. One is, as a legal expert, I wear that hat, and I can speak about the cases that I'm working in, what's going on, and what the law, as I was taught in law school, and what the law supposedly is. I can answer that way, or or I can give an answer as a voluntarist, which is formerly known as an anarchist, but I am very much a voluntarist, and which is just the belief that all human interaction should be voluntary and none of it should be coerced. But this is like a little speech that I give to all of my clients before I take their money, and that is that I inform them, look, I will do the best I possibly can for you. Nobody knows the law like I do. I write very, very strong and persuasive law papers, but you have no rights and there is no law. And when I say there's no law, I'm not kidding. I'm not being hype. I'm not being hyping this, right? And I'm not even exaggerating, right? The law simply is whatever the judge says today, right? So I can go either direction with an answer, and it's very nice of you to invite me on. Thanks for having me on, Dale.
All right, thanks for coming. Like, I know personal experience, there is no law when it comes down to the judges and how they, when they, you've got political judges that do a certain thing rather than actually follow the law and so forth. And I know one of the cases that you'd mentioned that we talked previously that you're working on was, I guess, Jeff Younger's case, because that one was got a lot of headlines where the judge there is not following the law and just punishing someone for politically, right? And so you want to.
Well, yeah. So, so the Jeff Younger case is still going on. For anybody who maybe doesn't know, Jeff Younger case was a family law case, and the issue was his soon-to-be ex-wife named Ann Georgelis wanted to transgender their son. He's now all of 12 years old, but this started when he was 2 years old. And he fought for a long time in Texas, and they didn't start him on puberty blockers yet. He fought and fought, and there was no question that this woman wanted to do that, and it has always wanted to do that. Eventually, Jeff himself was instrumental in getting the law changed in Texas, but this was by 2021, 2022. But also around that same time, California passed a so-called sanctuary bill by this representative named Scott Wiener that basically said, if you're a child and you want to do this so-called gender-affirming care, come to California. We got you, right? We won't turn anybody down, and we won't obey any other state's law that says that you can't do this to a child. So Ann Georgelis picked up, moved to Los Angeles with both of their kids. They have twins, right? And Jeff fought that, but was unsuccessful at the Texas Supreme Court in trying to fight the move away. So we spent the last year, about 1 year from today. It's like March of 2025 as we speak. So we've been fighting this in Los Angeles, and took it to a trial that took place in October and November of 2024. The end result of that trial in Younger's case was that the judge, whose name is Mark Juhas, said that all of the expert testimony about whether this is harmful, whether sterilizing children is a thing, whether it's harmful, whether it causes brain damage, whether it causes bone damage, which of course these puberty blockers do all of that. None of that mattered, said the judge in his final ruling. In fact, the final ruling doesn't even mention, so we brought Dr. Miriam Grossman, a noted psychiatrist and author of a number of books and an expert witness in a lot of cases. And they brought expert witnesses too. None of that is in the final order at all, as if they never appeared, never testified, as if it never happened. And the final ruling was, we, the court, the Los Angeles Superior Court, we're not going to decide whether so-called gender-affirming care is good for kids or bad for care. We're just going to award legal custody to the mother, and she can do whatever she wants, right? And which is just bizarre, because there's no question what she's going to do. She's been after this for forever, right? She's never not wanted to do this. And Jeff, on his side, there's no possible way that if he was in charge that he would ever do this to his child. So there's no question the court did not have to guess what's going to happen, right? So, no, we're just going to award her legal custody, and she can do whatever she wants with the kid. The other major...
Go
ahead.
I just got to say something here. When the judge saw that she picked up and moved from one jurisdiction to another, and knowing that these were the laws that they had passed there, saying that they wouldn't respect what any other state had, and they were having this fight in another state, it's not hard, it's not rocket science to figure out that the actions demonstrate that this is what her intentions are, with a high degree of probability.
Yeah, so she was never unclear, right? This was the issue in Texas, and it was the issue in Los Angeles. She was not unclear. Neither side was unclear about what they would do. So there got to be, in 2021, the Texas judge issued what we called the no hormones, no surgery injunction. There was a court order that said, without an agreement of the parties or without a further court order, you can't do any hormones, no puberty blockers, no surgeries on this kid. Okay, so far so good. But then Jeff filed a motion to prohibit them from moving to California. They fought it and they won. Again, he took it all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court. And the Texas Supreme Court basically said, Mr. Younger, you already have a court order that says she's not allowed to do that. Okay, so what's the big deal here, right? And when the Texas Supreme Court absolutely had the authority to prohibit her from moving to another state, but they didn't do that. They said, "Yep, go ahead, move to another state." So eventually, the case was transferred to California. And we went from there. We did litigate. And I wanted to mention that one of the most egregious things that happened in the Los Angeles case was they issued what I call the Star Chamber Order. So this first judge, whose name was Michelle Kazadi, she issued an order for saying that the entire case is sealed and it's closed to the public. Okay, it's sealed retroactively and going forward, and it's closed to the courtroom. I mean, there's tremendous news media interest in this case at the national level and at the state level, all of that. And there have been many, many articles, and Jeff's been on Fox News and many other appearances. But no, we're just going to sweep this whole thing under the rug and shut it and close it down. So that's just completely unconstitutional.
Well, so. I get it. Like, cause in my divorce hearing or whatnot, like, I mean, I had a judge and I have all the documentation, and even from the police, the court directed the police to keep me out of court the day of my court hearing. And I had 2 court hearings.
Wow.
One for COVID, one for the custody issue, both on first appearances. They took me when me and my oldest daughter were going inside of the court. They bribed us, arrested us. They took me and strapped me to a bed and drugged me against my will. And on the judge used my divorce hearing to punish me for the COVID hearing. Like, I mean, I lost custody of my youngest daughter, who I haven't seen for 4.5 years. The house I was living in, everything that I have, wiped out. My oldest daughter, everything that she had, wiped out. Like, I mean, there was narratives put in from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police that matched what my ex-wife was saying, that I left and went to Calgary, and the house I was living in, she said she changed the locks. That wasn't the case. But they fabricated all of this stuff to go ahead, and then they kept going ahead and changing evidence, committing fraud. Like, I have record of all of this, so I understand what you're saying. This is the type of thing that you're seeing in the family courts. There's no law whatsoever. So, I mean...
So what are we going to do about it? That's the question. It's like we hear this story, all the details are completely different from one story to the next. But the bottom line seems to be exactly the same every time. People come and they just want justice. They want a fair and equitable distribution of the property, or they want, joint custody of the kids, or whatever it is. And you get into the family court, but then once you're in, it's like you have to pay, and pay dearly, with children, with money, with property, to get out, right? It really amounts to, and they just wear people down with this, to where people basically just say, okay, I've had enough. This just goes on and on and on. I'm done. I've had enough. Let me out of here. So, but what are we going to do? That's the question.
Well, this is why the elected officials, this is where they have to step in, because the judicial branch is supposed to be independent, but the laws are there to govern the judicial branch. Now, when the judicial branch is not following the law nor the Constitution, the executive and the legislative branch have to step in and restrain that type of behavior. Not sitting down and saying they're going to interfere in the decisions that they make, because they should be free to make the decisions based on the law and the Constitution. Now, if they're making decisions not based on the law and the Constitution, then they have to fix that and put in severe penalties for them to do that, because this is what we're seeing.
So let me just jump in there, because actually judges were never supposed to decide cases. This is very important. I'm going to say it again. Under the Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence that we supposedly inherited from medieval England, judges were never supposed to decide cases. Juries were supposed to decide cases, and a judge was just supposed to be there to make sure there was a fair proceeding that went on. And this, again, comes back to like the medieval Star Chamber, which, if you don't know, was in medieval England. And it was, first of all, a top secret tribunal, and there was no jury. It was just an officer of the state, a judge, who would pass his judgment upon you. And nobody would ever find out about it. It was just, that was the law.
Yes.
And we figured out this is tyranny, and this is wrong. And the jury is one of the best inventions of mankind, because that's not the government. It's just a bunch of folks. And I trust folks to make a right decision on who's telling the truth and what the facts are, more so than I ever trust any government official.
Yes, but the judge still is the one that issues the orders based on whatever conclusion they come to, right? So when the jury pronounces that, then the judge issues the order based on what the jury does. Is that not correct?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about family court, so family court is not and never was a jury trial, right? So
no.
Basically, family court is unconstitutional from the get-go, all right? So, the Sixth and the Seventh Amendments of the Constitution promise the right to a jury trial, right? The Sixth Amendment says in a criminal matter, Seventh Amendment in a civil matter, and family court can be both, right? Anytime you're arguing about the money and the property, that's a civil matter. Anytime you're arguing about custody and whether your kids should be allowed to see you or whatever, that's clearly a criminal matter. And so if you're going to believe in the Constitution, then we can't believe in any of these special court systems that they've come up with over the years. Family court being one of them. I include also probate court and child welfare, or CPS court.
Yes.
I sort of lump those all three together. But then even more recently, they've come up with, back in the 1980s, they came up with vaccine court. Okay, so if you have a vaccine injury, you can't go to court. You have to go to this special place, right? And there's other ones too. And I would say, as a general matter, anytime they come up with one of these special court systems that has no jury and where you have to go with a certain kind of a dispute, the fix is in, or you just know that there's just something not right about this whatsoever.
Well, you also have that thing there where you're looking at everybody has the right to due process. And you look at it on on for the Fifth Amendment. And then you have to look at the fact that you have Article 6 of the Constitution that states that, like the U.S. Constitution, any federal law and any treaties are binding on every judge in the state. So now if you have a family court judge that is going and doing these things, they still have the obligations and the bindings of Article 6 on them. And they're completely flouting the Constitution. And they've done this in a manner because states are supposed to have the ability to push out federal encroachment. But when you're flippantly violating both the state and U.S. Constitution, you're essentially making the people that enter into that family court slaves, because you have no rights. You have no right to due process. There's no protection for liberty, because nobody can be deprived of liberty without life or liberty without due process of the law. So if you take a child and move it from one parent to the other, that's a twofold deprivation of liberty right there, because not only is the child being deprived of their liberty, but the parents are being deprived of the liberty. And you cannot make a proper determination unless you have both parties talking and representing what they're putting forth their evidence, so that the best decision can be made. And it should be in an open, transparent manner. And I agree, there should be a jury of their peers, not these tribunals that happen because you're essentially having the inquisition for your children.
And of course, the fundamental problem when you start looking at these rules, right, like the Bill of Rights, right, and what the Constitution says that the government is not allowed to do, and what government officials are not allowed to do, there's a couple obvious problems that sort of perk their heads up and raise red flags, and that is, like, so what if they do, right? Okay, so First Amendment, they can't infringe with your free speech. And they can't establish a religion or interfere with your free exercise of religion, right? And you, under the First Amendment, have a right to petition that they can't interfere with. Second Amendment, you have the right to possess guns, right? Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable search and seizure. Fifth Amendment has a lot of stuff in it, but supposedly they can't deprive you of your property for public use, right, without just compensation. You also have the right to remain silent, etc. Sixth Amendment is the right to an attorney and a jury trial and the right to confront your witnesses. Okay, very important. Seventh Amendment, right to a jury trial in a civil matter. Ninth and 10th Amendments basically say, look, if it's not explicitly given to the federal government as far as an authority that they have in this Constitution, then it's reserved to the states or to the people respectively. But the problem is, of course, so what if they do, right? So any lawyer could look at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in particular and notice the problem, right? If you read it as a contract, there's no enforcement clause. Right? Now, eventually they came along in the 1870s, I think, and came out with what's now Section 1983, which is the Civil Rights Act. And it does give you a cause of action where you can supposedly sue government officials for violating your civil rights, like due process, for instance. Due process is in the 5th and the 14th Amendment. But there's really not a definition of what due process means, right? It just says, you get due process. Well, what does that mean? And there's been a ton of case law trying to define what that means, but it just kind of means whatever just happened to you in court, right?
We're going to just take a short break here to get a word from one of our sponsors.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets.
I'm interrupted this commercial to do something I've never done before. Get 2 MyPillows absolutely free on orders of $100 or more. I can't do this forever, so get on board with this great sale today. Our best-selling 6-piece bath towel sets or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Our famous standard MyPillows, only $14.98. Queens, $18.98. King size, only $1 more. Body pillows, $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bed sheet sets. Any size, any color. So go to MyPillow.com or call that number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And when you spend $100 or more, get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
All right, we're kind of back here. There's a couple of things that I wanted to sit down and talk about when you mentioned about the enforceability. Well, when you look at the contract, there's only 2 parties in the contract. And one of them is a position, because the government is an elected position. They're representative to go and fulfill a job. So if there's 2 parties in the contract, who's left to enforce it? It's implied that the people are the ones who enforce it, because the people are the ones who have the greatest say, because they're basically the bosses. And so when you look at the construction of the Constitution, the First Amendment comes down, and you have like the right to petition, and then you have the Second Amendment. And the reason why it was in that order was because of this. If you go back to the Declaration of Independence, the last thing that they said before they went to war was their repeated petitions, humble petitions, were met with repeated injury. That is the strongest piece of protest, peaceful protest, that you get to before you initiate the second, to sit down and say, if you take away this first, the second is here to make sure that you're going to know that you're going to find out if you do. And so this is the way that they would, when you look at the construction of the way these things went, it was a logical progression. Now they started to articulate it and so forth. But the principle for due process came from, because these were Protestants, right? And they understood what happened. And the idea of due process was everything that was not present in Europe. So they got a lot of these ideas that you got to present your case, because God judges people and he judges people fairly. He allows things to play out. The evidence comes in on both sides. And this is where they get the due process from. But then other people begin to start overcomplicating it and so forth, because everybody should to get to present their evidence and put it in open court for people then to make a decision, because this is fundamentally what was inherited through the British system, where they started to get these processes put into place after coming out of tyranny. And what it should do is the due process should get better as our understanding develops, not get worse, is what we're seeing right now. And so, I mean, there's a lot there. But
so I did have some, ideas back in 2020, I think, when I wrote this, about how to reform or make the family court system better, more accountable, more responsive to the people. And I've been a voluntarist for at least 20, 25 years or so. But when I went to law school and for a while after, I sort of suspended my disbelief, right? And so I definitely can wear that hat. And I was wearing that legal expert hat when I wrote this. So, there's I actually don't have it in front of me right now, but I remember some of the points that, and I also have some other ideas of what might need to happen if we're going to believe that we can actually fix this family court system. But a couple of them, like number one, was the concept of judicial immunity. Now, and this is not just family court, this is the court system. But if you don't know, I know you do, Dale, but if you don't know, the judges are basically immune from lawsuit. And that as long as they're acting in what they call their judicial capacity, they can injure you on purpose. Okay, they can knowingly just injure you, right? Financially, emotionally, whatever it is, and do so on purpose. They cannot be held liable. Okay, they can violate the law on purpose, and they can't be held liable. And this is terrible law. This absolutely invites abuse. How could anybody see it otherwise, right? Is that it just invites and allows and encourages these people, right? These judges who are just people after all, they're just humans, right? it invites them to all kinds of corruption and abuse. So I really think that we need to take a strong look at judicial immunity
Well,
and get rid of it.
yeah, yes, judicial. I know in Canada, judicial immunity is just a doctrine. It's not written anywhere, and it wouldn't stand up to a constitutional challenge because
Well, no. And it's. I mean, there are a number of cases, like Supreme Court cases.
yeah,
So
yes,
that's the constitutional challenge, right? Okay. So I mean, careful, Dale. You're going to wander into anarchist territory. I mean, I don't want to do that to you. I will get to the actual real solution by the end of the podcast. Hopefully, I can say a few words about the actual real solution that's going to happen, right? But yeah, the constitutional challenge means you take it to court, and if you're lucky, it gets all the way to the Supreme Court, like the case called Stump v. Sparkman. This was a U.S. Supreme Court case, which was, by the way, it was about involuntarily sterilizing a minor child for eugenics purposes. That's what the case was about. And this Judge Stump allowed that. There was no hearing. The minor child, this girl, she never got an attorney appointed for her. Absolutely nothing. He just signed off on a court form and said, "Okay, Mom, yeah, you want to sterilize this child? Go ahead." And they lied to the child and said, "You're having your appendix out," when they actually did a tubal ligation on her, and she was sterilized and didn't find that out until years later when she got married, found out she couldn't have kids. Then she tried to sue the judge, under Section 1983, right? You violated my civil rights. Went all the way to the Supreme Court, but they said, surprise, surprise, no. Judicial immunity, don't you know, right? And it's just, so yeah, I think that judge should have been held liable and punished severely.
This is where the legislators have to come in, because you can't allow the judge, like when you go to the court system to fix a problem in the courts, and this is where I have an issue with case law. Case law is being used in a manner to construct law when courts have no authority to construct laws, and you're getting frameworks for that, and you cannot do that because judicial immunity is not existent in any law. It's structured by decisions of judges to say, okay, we're going to protect ourselves. And you're giving basically the rapist the ability to protect themselves from the victims. Because when you're doing this, it's extremely predatory when a judge abuses the power of the state, and the state now needs to come in and put in penalties, hard penalties for judges who do things like this, because this isn't like, oh, I made a mistake signing something. You're sterilizing someone and destroying their life without their knowledge or consent, and that you get to walk away. That judge should be in prison.
I agree, and this is going on right now, of course, with the whole gender affirming care issue that I'm so passionate about these days with the two cases that I'm involved in. So the second thing on my list of reforms is kind of related to judicial immunity, and that is this litigation privilege. So the litigation privilege, which again applies to the entire civil court system, including family law, is this idea that you cannot be sued for you can't be sued for perjury, is basically what it comes down to. If you come into court and you testify as a witness and you say false things that are not only false, but they injure somebody, because sometimes false statements can totally injure another person.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but the rule is that if you do that in court, that you are absolutely privileged and you're immune from anybody trying to sue you for that. And the sort of the excuse, the rationale, which is very similar to the rationale given for judicial immunity, is, well, if potential witnesses were afraid that if they testified that somebody was going to sue them, well, nobody would ever want to testify. So in order to protect the integrity of the court system, we have to make witnesses immune from lawsuit. That's the excuse that's given. And
That's just inviting people to lie. That's that you can't. You have to. You can protect witnesses that are telling the truth, and that's no problem, because you know, if their story is checks out and it's true and it meets the evidence, then they shouldn't be punished for that. But if it's determined that you're saying something that's lies, of course you should be punished.
And you're absolutely right that, you know, far from protecting the integrity of the court system, it predictably has transformed the court system into a cesspool of relentless dishonesty and lies and filth. And you know, every family law case that I've been involved in, not only my own, but all these other ones that I've worked in, it's just relentless dishonesty. It's just lies. And how many of you, a lot of you, I'm sure your listeners have probably, you know, been through family court. And is there anyone want to come forward and say, yeah, I went through family court and, you know, my ex just told the truth and I just told the truth, or you know, my ex tried to lie, but they didn't let her get away with it. No, that's not how it goes. It's just lies, and these judges know it's lies and don't do anything about it. And in fact, if you try to sue somebody for perjury, right, you can't do it. In fact, in a lot of states like California, there's an anti-slap motion, which is like if you even try to sue somebody for what they said in court, you're the one who will end up paying a sanction, and you're the one who will be punished for that, right?
Well, then there comes this point of where they sit down and say, well, I'm fearful that they might do this. And so then they go ahead and rule based on someone's feeling that they might be injured or they might do something, in the absence of any evidence that this has actually taken place. And so this is things that need to be restrained, because I've dealt with this. I've watched a lot of people deal with this. This is insane.
And that I mean, that leads me to another point in my family law Bill of Rights, which had to do with these domestic violence restraining orders. Now, I know a lot about California. There are similar things in most states, and I don't know about Canada, but but it's similar, right? I know in California, you can get a domestic violence restraining order for any past act of abuse, right? So how do they define abuse? Well, there's a long list of things, many of which are good, right? If you hit the other person, if you threaten to kill them, all that's good law, right? You shouldn't be able to hit people or threaten them or all that. But then they have this sort of catch-all that is any conduct that destroys the mental or emotional calm of the other person. If that's domestic violence abuse. Well, what the hell does that mean? Or what doesn't it mean? Right? And this is one thing I ended up arguing to the California Court of Appeals in my oral argument in my restraining order hearing, which I was subjected to a DV restraining order because I sued my ex-wife / business partner successfully in federal court. I won a copyright infringement case, and it was held that my litigation was so stressful for her that it constituted domestic violence abuse, right? And so First Amendment right to petition, be damned, all of that, right? It's just like none of that. I filed an anti-slap motion that was just like denied, no reason given. But I argued to the Court of Appeals. I said, suppose I am wearing a T-shirt that has a very offensive slogan on it, and it upsets my soon-to-be ex-wife, right? Is that grounds for a restraining order? Or suppose my ex-wife is taking birth control pills, right? And that like violates my religious principles, and so it upsets my peace of mind. Is that grounds for a restraining order? Or suppose that she voted for Kamala Harris and I voted for Donald Trump, and both of us got completely upset at the other one. It destroyed our mental or emotional calm. Both of us did because of who we voted for. Is that grounds for a restraining order, right? And the court cut me off. They said, we want to talk about your specific case, not hypothetical. So I'm like, I'm making a point here. And then they wouldn't let me talk. But I had a very serious point to make. And that was each of those three examples absolutely could destroy somebody's mental or emotional calm. And yet all three of those things, there are Supreme Court cases that say they're constitutionally protected activity, right? A slogan on a T-shirt is free speech, right? Contraception is, you have a right to use that, and voting rights. Okay, so you have those, right?
But
so, go ahead.
Hurt feelings does not mean abuse. That's just the way it is. And
well, it does now. Is my point, right? It does now. So,
that doesn't make any sense, because if you decide between two parties on something, somebody wins and somebody loses, somebody's going to get hurt feelings. Are they going to sit down and say, well, now are we going to go ahead and just put domestic violence on anybody who loses anything? You lose a sports game, or are you going to sit down and go and get a restraining order against somebody? You lose a tennis match to your spouse? Like, where does this end?
I mean, good. Where does it end? And it's just, it ends only. It never ends. It absolutely never ends, and it's obviously invites like capricious and arbitrary rulings, whatsoever. Just absolutely, the law is whatever the judge says that it is, right? So I'm opening up. I found my Bill of Rights. So let's see if I can remember some of these other points. Yeah. So freedom of speech. Here's what I wrote. I'll just read this a little bit. The people find that it has become common practice in family, probate, and child welfare proceedings for a judicial officer to order a parent not to speak to a child or to regulate the content of speech from parent to child. The people find that any such order prohibiting or regulating communication from parent to child constitutes a prior restraint. That's the Supreme Court buzzwords. And is presumptively invalid and subject to strict scrutiny analysis. Now that's like legalese, but basically it's like they have no business telling me what you can or can't say to your own kids. Period. That's like the end of it.
Well, they also should allow you to have freedom to speak freely within the court, which a lot of the times they're restraining defense. Like, for example, I've dealt with this in the courts, and a judge will go in, something's filed, they go back and just retroactively strike it from it, and so forth, so that then you walk in and you're like, well, sorry, you don't have a defense. What do you mean I don't have a defense? And then it's like, then you have somebody there that's clearly just lying, but then you can't defend yourself because they've restricted your ability to speak. And
that goes right back to a right to a jury trial, right? You can't once you say something. If you say something in court in a judge trial, then they can strike it, and then they can pretend that they never heard that, right? Or that it's just, I'm not going to consider that. Whereas you can't unring the bell, right? You could say to a jury, you're not to consider this because it was stricken or whatever. And it's like, that doesn't fly, right? That's why I trust jury, and I think that would be a big part. If we want to dream of good government and a good court system, the right to a jury trial is certainly one of them. In family law, you should have rights in a criminal proceeding. Like anytime there's a criminal penalty that's at risk, right? Like having your kid taken away, you should have any of that. First of all, it should be deemed criminal in nature. And so you should have the right to remain silent. You should have the right to an attorney, the right to confront witnesses, All these things are routinely denied in family court, right?
Getting
Just routinely.
getting your child taken away is worse than a jail sentence.
Absolutely.
It's worse because, like, I mean, the child, it's so damaging to the child, and it's also damaging to the parent, but it's worse for the child because the child loses out on the development that they can never get back. They're destroying children by doing this, and the child protective services are even worse. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, they need to put.
And that yeah, no, they definitely are. I mean, now that really leads me to another point, which is that, is this on purpose, right? Is the family court really bad at what they're supposed to be doing, and they're injuring children when really it's all supposed to be about best interest of the child? I used to think that. I used to think that the court system was corrupt and had been corrupted by certain lawyers and certain judges who were bad. I now no longer believe that. What I do believe is that the court system, and including but not limited to the family court system, was established from the get-go for the purpose of doing exactly what it is doing, which is destroying families
Of
and taking all
course,
the
it
money.
was. Because when I design things for a living, this is background in engineering. I a technologist. So I have to sit down and look at all the possible things that can go ahead when I'm putting this together. You analyze risk and the threats that you're going to come in when you're putting this in together, and look at the ways that it can be exploited, right? Because you have to then mitigate those risks, because you're like, okay, a normal person wouldn't do this, but not every person is going to be reasonable. And you have to account for the unreasonable nature when you put these things in. They understand that they're going to be exploited. In fact, they count on it because the way that it is constructed, it gives a perfect place, especially the civil court system, for organized crime to operate with impunity without having the criminal system overlooking it. Because the only way you can actually operate a civil court system is if you have the criminal system overlooking it, and there's criminal penalties for anybody involved who is going to operate in a criminal manner, because you're seeing a system of literal slavery inside of the court system.
And of course, a lot of people have talked about, but I think it bears repeating, that there is federal money available and that is routinely distributed, matching funds for every child that is taken into the system. The county gets money for that. Every child support payment that is awarded and collected, there's matching funds for that. So there are additional funds available for every diagnosis of any medical diagnosis like ADHD or whatever, and on and on. With the point being, big federal money is incentivizing, not only allowing, but incentivizing the child trafficking racket that the CPS and family court system has become. Right? It's not only that; it's also a house stealing and property stealing racket and a lot of other things.
That's
But
peonage.
there's just no way. Look, people understand basic economics, and when you anything that you subsidize, you incentivize, right? Period.
Yes.
End of story.
Yeah. Yeah, we're running up here on time here, but I agree with you on the family court. They really need to put the brakes on this. So before we wrap up here, do you want to tell people where they can find you, where they can help you, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get a hold of me initially is by email, and it's alex@pmjmp.org. And whatever's on your mind, you let me know. I'm very, very busy with the cases that I'm working in, but I do like to hear from like-minded people. I do, before I forget, I do want to jump to the solution to all of this. And that is to first realize that the entire family court system and this court system and really the entire government exists in your mind. These people have authority over you simply because you believe that they do. Okay. And ultimately, we are going to get to the point where we stop believing that these people are allowed to do what they're doing. And just like, when you stop believing in Santa Claus, you don't worry about going to the North Pole and wiping out the factory and all the little elves. You just stop believing because you know it doesn't exist. And while the people and the guns and the buildings and the things that the government actors have, those are very real. The authority that they say they have to tell everybody what to do and that they can make orders and pass laws and do all of this stuff, the authority, it doesn't exist. It only exists between your ears, behind your eyes, and nowhere else. It's in your mind because we've all been taught to believe in it. So once we just change our mind and stop believing that these people actually have authority over us, over our children, when they don't, that's the beginning of the solution. That it's not that there's not problems in the world. Of course there are, but we need to solve our own problems. So if you have a problem with your ex, don't go to court if you can possibly help it. Figure it out, work it out, whatever your problem is. That's where I want to see this world going. So, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me rant. Thank you.
All right. Yes. Thank you for coming. And so, yes, I agree that we need to keep it out of the court's hands, and it only exists because we believe in it. And so I'll close here with a prayer, and then, we'll see you again. We'll have to bring you on again for some updates. All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. And Lord, I thank you for the hope that you've given us and the work that Alex is doing and others like him, and help that the men and women can come together to rebuild the families, the community, and the nation. And Lord, the churches as well, so that the children can have some protection from this evil is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all.
Amen.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you. We'll see you all again.